We're kicking off today with an amazing virtual keynote on WW's digital transformation. It's actually our last virtual session. Everything else will be live on stage. And in this session, we get to learn about how COVID accelerated WW's pivot into digital from their Chief Product Officer, Lucinda Newcomb. She's being interviewed by Barbara Thau. She's the Senior Features Editor at at Chamber of Commerce. Lucinda came to WW actually I think right before the pandemic, from Walmart, and previously held digital leadership roles at Sephora and Gap Inc. And in this session, she not only talks about the WW story, which is interesting unto itself, but really gives you some great advice on how to think about the customer journey and the digital product experience. So with that, I'll turn it over to the virtual stage.
So glad to be here with Lucinda Newcomb, Chief Product Officer for WW, formerly known as Weight Watchers. Welcome. Thanks for being here. So just sort of to lay the foundation a little bit, in conversations with your CEO, Mindy Grossman, in recent years, she's talked about Weight Watchers' transition into a technology company with a human-centric overlay, with the goal of personalizing the consumer experience and in new ways. And this digital transformation was already in play, and then the pandemic hit. So I just wanted to sort of set the stage to talk about what the foundational pillars are of that transformation, why it was necessary in the consumer and the business landscape.
Sure. We were founded back in the 50s by a woman named Jean Nidetch, who had this brilliant revelation at the time that, losing weight was a lot more fun if you did it with your friends. Oh, and hey, it was a lot more effective. And, the fact is that the needs for weight loss, there are some universal needs that everybody has, because you don't just need to eat fewer calories. Boy, if it were that simple, wouldn't need us. But all of the things you need on that journey around your behavior change, around habit formation, changing bad habits, finding better habits, and all of that requires accountability. It requires knowledge, it requires support, it requires motivation, and different people need those things in different degrees. But those universal needs, those haven't really changed. But what has changed is the consumer and the consumer's needs and how they want to consume that and get that accountability and get that experience. And so as you look at, our program has evolved, it's scientifically backed, there's over 100 plus clinical studies. We haven't had to change the science per se, but the fact is that how we deliver on those needs, those accountability, on that support should always evolve with our members. And so we were already on that transformation of figuring out how to make sure that we had a digital experience. We had a digital experience that was convenient, that was on the go for people who have less time, who aren't able to necessarily go to our workshops. But also we realized it wasn't just a transformation of our experience, it was also a transformation of us as a company. And thinking about the collaboration tools that we use, thinking about our technology infrastructure, everything from security and how we are set up to be collaborative, our workspace, thinking about our metrics for success, how we define success. So I will say the pandemic definitely accelerated our shift and accelerated our transformation, but it certainly didn't cause it. It didn't start it. And also we were extremely fortunate that we'd already been on this journey, because it meant that we were able to essentially shift overnight, both for our employees, but also more importantly for our members. Although technically our members, it took us 6 days, but it was practically overnight in the grand scheme of things to see us be able to shift, because we were not only digitally centric for our members, but also digitally enabled in how we were delivering our experience and how we were delivering and working together as a company.
So that foundation, so in early 2020, the pandemic hit, right? And the brand evolution that you just described, and essentially, and in the midst of pandemic-related shutdowns, enabled you guys to pivot. What did that pivot look like? Like, I'd love to just the in the weeds of what it looked like. And you mentioned the 6 days, consumer facing. How did it look like operationally? The meat of that.
Yeah. Let me start by saying my first day at WW was March 9th, 2020.
Wow.
So do the math.
Wow. It was that week, right? That everything changed.
It was that week. It was that week. And I live in San Francisco, our headquarters in New York. I'd always planned to be in our New York headquarters for the first week. And I still remember that Sunday being at SFO, about to get on a flight and thinking to myself, I'm crazy. What am I doing? But the fact is, like, it's interesting because in my first 8 days, we went from, okay, I think this, okay, something might change. Let's talk about hypothetically to, like, and, literally on my first day, try to figure out where my office was. And thank goodness I figured that out because I've used that knowledge so much. But, the fact is, like, on day 3, it was, we should have a backup plan and figure out what we would do just in case we need to pivot and change to delivering our workshops virtually. To on my 8th day, so 6 days after that, I wonder if we had actually launched thousands of virtual workshops. We had trained thousands of coaches. We had communicated with thousands of members, millions of members. We had set up thousands of Zoom calls so that our workshop members did not miss a beat. And the reason was we looked at this and we thought, with all of this craziness happening in the world, if somebody's on a weight loss and wellness journey, the last thing we want to do is leave them without that support. Because we all know in a weight loss journey, it's not you decide once and then you're good. Like, you have to decide every day, sometimes
Yes.
every minute, to stay committed. And that's where that support and the accountability. So we realized how important it was to muster all of our resources, all of our teams. Everybody came on side. It was literally my first few days. I would be on Zoom calls with 100 people. Thank goodness everybody has a little label.
Right.
As we were figuring out how to muster our resources and launch these virtual workshops, and it really took a village. And something that we had been talking about, hey, wouldn't it be great if we do virtual workshops? We've been talking about that for a while, but this pandemic, never waste a good crisis. It
Yeah.
necessitated that just sheer focus of doing what's right for our members and getting online with these virtual workshops as soon as we possibly could. So it was a wild and crazy first 8 days. I saw everybody without makeup on, like, within about 5 minutes of meeting them. So it was a great.
And you talked about, just this is 8 days, you moved essentially thousands of workshops online, right? And so, and we've seen how the consumer has changed. I'm curious um, how the consumer's needs have changed given this, and how what were luxuries are now, needs as their expectations, and they're accustomed to more options, and what has that meant for WW.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to it. Number one, the consumer behavior and consumer needs have evolved and shifted. You see all those memes about the extroverts who suddenly found their introvertedness, but the fact is, like, everybody's behavior has changed, right? We are not going out as much as we used to, and so we've always been finding that right balance between offering. We offer unlimited workshops. You can choose. Do you want to do it virtual or do you want to do it physical? And the reason is because, dirty little secret, virtual is better. There are some very specific ways in which virtual is better. It allows us to have chat at the same time as we can be having a conversation. It allows the convenience. You don't have to get in your car to get to the workshop on time. It allows you to have, hey, I want to choose and shop around which coach it has the most affinity for me. And also, we heard these great stories. A mother in New Jersey, her daughter in California, being able to go to the same workshop together. And so, as soon as you started to see that virtual was in fact better in some of these ways, we were able to lean into it and continue to evolve them, but really find those lessons and find those insights. Oh, and by the way, because it's digital, we had all this better analysis, we had better data, we had the ability to innovate. And so, really making sure, as we talked about, we continue to solve for the need of the member, but we've now got this new medium to do it. And it doesn't mean physical is bad or that we're going to kill it. But the fact is, like, finding that right balance of which experience is better for which member and which circumstance and situation has really allowed us to take a more nuanced approach. Because at the end of the day, we fundamentally believe in meeting the member where they are. And that is something, as Mindy talks about that digital transformation, that was all about it. That was all behind there. And how do you meet the member where they are and what they need? And this has just allowed us, as they're evolving more rapidly than we've ever seen consumer behavior shift before. At the same time, we are keeping up and evolving and making sure that we are always there. And even as the situation changes in the world, making sure that we have that ability to meet our member where they need to be.
What you're describing is interesting because we're hearing this across other businesses and retailers and brands where the virtual can be more personal, right?
Yes.
And the initial pillar was personalization,
Yes.
one of the digital transformation pillars. And then what brings to mind, can you talk a little bit about Consumer 360? And that is, that feature.
Yeah. So we launched virtual workshops, like I said, in like my first 8 days. So it's really boring onboarding.
Yeah.
But then we also last year, by the end of the year, we launched an entirely new membership experience, informed by what we learned in virtual workshops, but also informed by what we knew about our member behavior that had already been happening, and that we call Digital 360, D360. And the idea is, as we think about, as I mentioned, everybody has the same universal needs. I mean, my Aunt Linda, who's, by the way, lives in Plano, Texas, has been a member of WW for decades.
Go
Um,
Aunt Linda.
and I know because she texts me and tells me all about it. And I love her for it. But like she is one of our she's a member who likes and still loves going to those physical workshops. But we knew that there was this younger generation of millennials who were digitally savvy and also really time constrained. So we had already been starting down the path of figuring out what would we do for them. And it was great because virtual workshops allowed us to learn what did and didn't work from taking that exact replica and, copy paste, but actually the insights around this new design target, this new member that we were talking to, of what do they need and what do they want. And so what we launched with Digital 360 has three key things. It's based on our core digital program and our digital experience, but it adds three premium elements on top: premium coaching, premium content,
Mhm.
and premium community. And so, from the coaching perspective, we cast this talent. We have 12 in the US. We actually have this across five other geographies as well. We cast these coaches that are like like an influencer, like a Peloton, like somebody who you just like love. You hang on their every word. I listen to our Coach Faven, Coach Tess. I mean, and they speak to you, and you just say, "Oh my God, this is me. This is my journey. This is what I need. This is." And what we
Right.
do is we deliver that, because we can deliver that in a virtual experience. You can either attend it live and be part of the chat and part of all the conversation happening with the community in real time, or say at 1 a.m. you're up feeding the baby and you are having a craving and you want to do something, like you can watch it on demand as well. And so again, taking this coaching and this premium experience that we know our members wanted, and that motivation and inspiration, and then packaging it in a way that was more accessible, that was there, and having this community then that is really accelerated by the coaches,
Yeah.
and gives you more of that accountability as well, because you can find people who are similar to you, who are there at 1 a.m. and want to talk about stress eating at 1 a.m., right? And so bringing those premium experiences together, really at that intersection of digital and in person, if you will, because it is being driven virtually.
And this is something that this is a premium offering, right? A
Yes.
premium, another layer, a subscription layer for WW, and
Yes.
that sort of builds on the consumer habits that have changed with the Pelotons of the world, with how with how consumers are consuming content. So it's sort of
Yes.
it's a natural evolution of what the consumer has become accustomed to. I'm curious about what, this has been such a learning moment for all of us, right? This whole period, for for businesses, for executives. What would you have done differently? Was there is there any like lesson learned that comes to mind in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier, never waste a good crisis. I think
Yes,
it's a great lesson for all of us.
seriously.
A reminder. When we first did this, like I said, we looked at this as, okay, what are we having to take away because it's virtual, right? What have we lost because it's virtual? Which, by the way, I remember when we shifted to mobile back in the day. When I was at Sephora, there was this first phase of mobile where it was all about how do you take the whole screen and shrink it down to this tiny little thing. And that first, when you find this massive trend hitting you square in the face, there's always a sense of loss. What did we lose about how we used to do things?
Yeah,
The sooner you can get into a place of looking into and embracing what is better, what is more powerful, what does it do that's better. And we found that in mobile, when you started to realize, like, oh, it's that sense of urgency, the fact that you can have it when you're on the go. Same thing with virtual, that you have this opportunity, like I said, to have these side conversations, to be able to engage with people all over the world, to find other people like you who you connect with. It is
yeah.
a massive opportunity, and I think we certainly leaned into it. But the sooner, and any time one of these types of, you know Hopefully we don't have any more pandemics, but the fact is whenever, I mean, there's always something. Like I said, mobile was another like seismic shift in consumer behavior that happened so fast in the grand scheme of our worlds. The
Mhm.
sooner you can lean in and figure out what is better, you're going to be able to differentiate yourself. You're going to actually be able to win the game.
So lean into what is better. Actually, that's interesting. That's a good takeaway. In your role as chief product officer, it's always interesting to sort of get the digital transformation. It's a term that's so massive. What does that mean? What did that mean in terms of how you go about what you decided to invest in and what to bet on at WW specifically in terms of delivering, meaningful growth driving uh, digital experiences for consumers, and what role does the consumer play in that? I should ask.
Yeah, so there's two mantras that I like to think about. And by the way, same was true when I was at Sephora, at Walmart, at Gap. The fact is, client experience is queen, right?
Mhm.
If you build an experience that actually meets the needs of your customer, of your member, everything else gets easier. And so the more you start with what does the member need you're solving for and what is the importance of that need, that is going to help dictate everything else you prioritize. Because the role of product and your experience is always going to be making sure that the juice is worth the squeeze, but it's also the most juice you can get, right? Everybody
Yeah.
loves prioritization until their priority isn't the priority. The way you have to prioritize is always by identifying what are those member needs that are the most critical to solve in order to drive that engagement. And that is about building what it is that your customer, that your member actually needs. And the way you do that is the second mantra that I have, which is you always put the member at the center. And it's the
Mm.
member journey. Because the fact is, launching a whole bunch of features does not solve the member need. It does not solve the customer problem. It might, you might get lucky, right? Like
Yeah.
you launch a whole bunch of crap and see what works. But in fact, if you think about what is the impact we're trying to have on the customer, on the member journey, it has to be actually helping them achieve their goal, right? Search doesn't matter unless you actually find what you need to solve the problem or opportunity that you had. Similarly, it doesn't matter if we give you a great tracking tool or give you a great coach experience if you're not successful at weight loss. Our job is to help you on that journey and to understand the different phases of that journey and the different states you might be in, how engaged you're feeling. Like I said, some days are harder than others on a wellness journey. And so, how do we always be thinking about where's our member? What do we need to do for our member in this moment to help them stay engaged? And that's
Yes.
really how you make sure that you're prioritizing the right experiences.
You have a really rich retail background. You touched on it. So there's Sephora, there's Walmart, there iconic brands, the Gap. What can you say in a nutshell about the impact being at those brands and has had on WW and you work at WW?
Yeah, for me, it's always about solving a customer problem, right? As you think about the, in the retail space, was always about the purchase funnel, right? Are they at awareness? Are they at interest, desire? What are you solving for them? What are the tools you're bringing in to help them solve for that and decide if this is what's right for them? Similarly, at WW, as we talk about that journey, it's a longer journey, it's a harder journey. It's not as much that, you get the payoff at the end, but it's not quite the instant gratification. But the fact is, thinking about what are those needs that you have at any single moment. And that's where personalization comes in. When we talk about meeting our members where they are, it's not just about making sure it's convenient and delivered virtually. It's also about where are you in your mindset? Where are you in your emotional space? Are you struggling today? Are you feeling on top of the world today? Right? Did you track and you stayed in your healthy eating zone? Or are you like, oh, last night was hard? And how do you help wherever the member is to help them with that next step on that journey? So it's a much longer funnel, it's a much longer journey because
Yes.
weight loss is not an overnight experience. But it is
Yes.
something that, as long as we keep that mindset of what is the need that they have today, we make sure that we are there, because our job is to be their coach, is to help them. And whether that's delivered through an actual coach, whether it's delivered, whether the app feels like it's helping coach, that's our job, is to help be there and be their emotional support animal that's helping
Yes.
in every step of that journey.
And that holistic, I think you're just describing a holistic, being of service in a way that's
Yes,
becoming more of the consumer experience, right? And
absolutely.
a leadership tip for an insider tip for companies embarking on a digital transformation.
Sure. Think about how you measure success. I
Mm,
remember I mentioned the mobile journey at Sephora. We used to talk about conversion all the time, and conversion is obviously very important in e-commerce and retail. And as we were talking about mobile, there was this moment where everybody's like, conversion on mobile is so much worse than desktop. And we said, wait a second, is it though? Because our definition of conversion was visits over purchases, purchases over
mhm.
visits. But if you put it over visitor and recognize that all of a sudden in a mobile world, you're constantly being interrupted by my lovely Aunt Linda texting me, but like you're always being interrupted while you're trying to do something in mobile. And so
Yes.
session based, visit based no longer makes sense. When we started looking at it from a visitor conversion perspective, it was like, oh my God, mobile is magical. And so anytime you're going through this major transformation, think about how you're going to define success and how you're going to define the KPIs and the metrics you're going to use to define success. Because that, in fact, as your guiding North Star, is so critical. And it shouldn't be how you used to define it. It needs to actually adapt to what you're trying to accomplish in the digital space.
So reevaluate your success metrics um, constantly. This
Yes.
has been such, I could talk to you for another hour. Just thank you so much, Lucinda. Wonderful to have this time with you.
Thank you, Barbara. My pleasure.